Menopause is still a very taboo subject, yet it happens in 100% of women. Every single woman will go through the change at some stage in their life. At what stage that is, or what symptoms or effect that has on them massively differs, and there's still a huge lack of awareness behind the subject. That is why on today's episode of the Manufacturing Leaders podcast, I have Sharon MacArthur on the show, who specialises in this subject. And I was really, in all honesty, quite apprehensive because it's a subject that I have a real lack of awareness. So I learned absolutely loads about the topic because we have a responsibility as leaders, we have a responsibility as family members to understand and help people in this space. This can affect people immensely. It can affect business immensely. So it felt very, very important to be able to talk to Sharon today because she goes through exactly what steps that businesses can take, what people can take to help family members, to help their wives, their sisters, their mothers, and how she directly helps people and businesses on this subject. And it's really going to open your eyes and enable you to have better, more in-depth and very, very important conversations that can change the game for a lot of people. So sit back and grab a coffee. Please enjoy the episode. As ever, please do me the honour of subscribing and liking to the show. Hope you enjoy it. Take care. Excellent. A massive warm welcome to Sharon MacArthur this morning. I am excited, nervous about this one, but this is something which is a really truly important topic and something which I'm sure is going to definitely educate me. I'm sure will educate others as well, and it's something that has a massive impact in the workplace. So welcome, Sharon, first of all. How are you?
I'm good. I'm canny, as they say around these parts. So yeah, really good. So thanks for having me.
And I've just been admiring you all. People who are listening, not watching, you've got a lovely multicolored wall behind you, which just said definitely makes me feel happier. So thank you very much for bringing that.
My pleasure. It's jazzy wallpaper.
First question is the same question I ask everyone. What does it mean to you to be a leader?
Well, it means giving a shit, is what I think it means. I'm being really brutal and blunt. I think for me, the best managers and leaders are people who notice you. And that means noticing you good and bad. So it isn't just that, oh, I've noticed you doing these really bad things and I only want to talk to you at that point. It's actually showing that you care about somebody, whatever time of day it is, and just genuinely noticing them. I also think the best leaders manage in the grey as well. So, and are prepared to take personal accountability. So how many people have I met in my lifetime as managers who've said, they said I had to do it? So you've got to be brave and you've got to be prepared to put your money where your mouth is. And that also means when you've got frameworks, when you've got policies, guidelines, rules, whatever they call them around at your place of work, you've got to be prepared to hear the human story, because everyone's going to be unique. And when we talk about diversity, everybody is unique, whoever they are. And then be prepared to hear that person's story and wrap the framework around that individual, not just treat everybody like a pawn in a game or in a black and white way, but really, really manage that individual the best that they can. So I'll give you an example. I was working in my big corporate job several years ago now. I've been left the corporate world over 11 years. So one of my managers, because I used to be a senior leader, I was managing managers. And one of my managers, unfortunately, lost his father. And the rules said he could only be off for 5 days paid leave, as in bereavement leave. Now, he recently lost his mother. So now he was effectively an orphan. And the guy was devastated. It was his dad, the only dad he's ever going to have. And I think in the end, I paid him for 7 weeks pay, because he was a good guy. You know, he was just in a terrible state. I can't imagine. So I was prepared that if anyone came to knock on my door to say, Sharon, why are you paying this guy? The rule said it's 5 days pay. I would have said, well, take it out of my pay then, because that's the right thing to do for that guy. Yeah. And I think it's really, really important that you treat everybody as an individual, but the rules are there as a baseline, but don't just use the rules in this black and white manner. You're not going to get your people to love, care, and respect you. And I think it's all about building that trust and that empathy and compassion, and not about being a pushover, not about just saying yes and being somebody's mate, but being prepared, to call somebody out for their bad behavior, but ultimately try and look for the best of them and help them to get the best out of themselves, really.
Yeah, that's what I think it's about. And compassion, empathy, I think they're two words which are you hear more and more now, but definitely weren't really prevalent, I would say, you know, back in the day, because it was more corporate, more black and white. People were probably scared to get in that grey zone, I guess, a lot of the time, which is did you see a difference in working in the corporate world where, like you say, there was set rules, regulations, then working now, I guess, with all different shapes and size businesses? Have you seen that variety now?
I think what's moved on is I'm talking about different things. So, you
Yeah.
know, my passion, you know, and I've been doing this work for over 6.5 years now around menopause. That wasn't really on the radar. Neurodiversity wasn't on the radar. We weren't talking about diversity. We weren't talking about these things that are now high up on people's agendas. You know, you hear people say, I want to be an employer of choice. I want people to come to me and choose me over all of this. So people are, I guess, have different expectations and demand different things now from employers, which I think is a really interesting shift.
Yeah.
So I think that means that we as leaders, we as managers, we as business owners have to keep checking out that landscape. And again, not just being a soft touch because we're running businesses, we have to be able to run our businesses, but it's maybe listening more. So I think listening is a really great skill to have, and just hearing what people have got to say. And if you can make small, reasonable adjustments that are often no cost or low cost, it could make a massive difference to your business. And so why would you not do that? Do you know what I mean? Why would you not?
100%. Well,
so an example of that, an example would be that guy was much more loyal to me, not because I did it out of loyalty, because he knew I cared about him in that moment.
Yeah, 100%. And that's loyalty he will repay back. And I think right now, when companies are scraping around trying to improve their employee value proposition and retention, all this type of stuff, and trying to think of the next flashiest benefit, well, just look after your people. Do you know what I mean? People don't move for benefits. They move because they like the manager. They don't like the manager.
Well,
it's that.
Yeah, totally. So just give a shit.
Yeah. Exactly that. Exactly that. Copyright that one.
Maybe that's one of your new values.
Yeah. You've segued nicely there in terms you mentioned it. Your passion now is the subject and topic of menopause. Why is that topic important to you?
Well, if you told me I was going to get passionately involved about menopause in the workplace, I would have said to you, Mark, absolutely no way. That's got nothing to do with me and my life. So my life was going along quite well. I had left the corporate world. I was running my own other business as a leadership confidence coach, and everything was going really well. And then I started to get these weird and wonderful things happening to me, as in I became exhausted for no apparent reason. I had a bout of what I could only describe as agoraphobia, where I was terrified to leave the house. And one of my best friends actually dared to say to me, Sharon, do you not think this could be menopause? And honestly, I was totally outraged, Mark. I was like, how dare you think that could be anything to do with me? Because in my utter ignorance, I was totally ignorant. Bearing in mind, I'd been a senior leader in a FTSE 100 company, and I thought I was really street smart, and I knew lots of things about a lot of things. And I just thought, well, that's not going to happen to me, whatever that thing is. That's going to happen to like women who are way, way, way older than me. And then I started to kind of, nothing was getting better. And I was thinking I might even have to wrap that business up because I just couldn't function very well. And I started to do some research. So this is like 8-9 years ago when this stuff wasn't really being talked about. And I started to realize that possibly it was this, whatever this menopause thing was. So as a really angry menopausal woman, I decided, well, if this was happening to me and I potentially was going to have to fold my current business, what about if you are employed in a business? What impact might that be having on individuals? Yeah. And so I suppose at the time I felt like the little boy in the King's New Clothes story. I felt like I could see something magical that nobody else could see. And nobody really was talking about that at that time. So when I started to go out and talk about menopause, nobody wanted to talk to me about menopause in the workplace. Yeah. People thought I was a bit out there, let me say. And now I've decided with my tongue firmly in my cheek that maybe I'm a genius. What can I say?
Love that. and it is, it's a subject, I guess, for a bizarre reason, I guess, is still a bit of a taboo. And imagine, I'm a bloke. And
are you?
and we,
despite the rumors,
exactly that. Monday to Friday, anyway. And we just probably think we don't have to deal with that, so we don't have to talk about it and it won't affect us. But actually, I love the fact you've linked that with the workplace and how it affects people in the workplace. But actually, it's something that means everyone needs to be part of. When was that eureka moment where you thought I can link the two?
Almost from the beginning, really. I knew I didn't want to talk to individual women because I say my mission, Mark, is to make menopause business as usual. That's just what my intention is, just to make it menopause business as usual. And I often use the phrase, we should be able to say, shouldn't we, hand, foot, vagina, penis in a sentence without going, oh, and having an attack of the vapors. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think we all like to think that we're adults in the workplace, and this is about bodily functions, body parts. And what you also have to appreciate when we're talking about humans is no human ages more well, and things happen to our bodies as we progress and get age. And also, I think age is a privilege, not a right. So menopause for most women will begin, surprisingly, for most women in and around their 40s. And that's a lot younger than I think a lot of people, even women themselves, would appreciate. And certainly, men would also even imagine that would happen. And I do think, I'm going to be brutal and say, I've met some men over the years who I do think women come with a manual, that were born with these special powers to know how to deal with periods. How to deal with periods, how to give birth, how to manage menopause. I keep saying, we've got no manual. We just have to live through it. Nobody's told us either.
Yeah.
So this is what I call a void of ignorance right now. Nobody has told us this information. So I guess I'll make my mission to make menopause business as usual and help to educate everybody. So the work that I do, it's completely inclusive. So I do, and I have used this phrase, and I discourage this phrase from being used, but lots of people talk about women of a certain age. So I'm here to dispel the myth that menopause. Well, yeah, because exactly, what is it? What is it, and how do you know what that woman looks like? How do you? Yeah, I've got a sign above the head saying, "Oh,
what is that age?"
Exactly. So menopause technically can happen to women at any age, and I think you'd probably, your listeners may be more surprised to appreciate and learn most women, as I said earlier, would begin menopause in and around their 40s. So had you pressed me to answer the question before I knew this stuff to describe a menopausal woman, so I'm asking really for out there forgiveness from everybody who's listening today, I would have said this, so please forgive me, a woman at least in their 80s who probably hadn't worked for about 20 years is what, in my mind's eye, a menopausal woman was going to be like.
Yeah.
So in other words, it was nobody like me.
Yeah, because no one had sat you down and like you said, there is no manual because who knows about it. I guess there's two things, there's one, and I guess first question is probably for the other one. What should people look out for people close to them? But actually, if you are a woman, what signs should you look out for? Because like you say, there was that initial denial, which I imagine is super normal. People think, well, can't happen for me for X amount of years, but it obviously does. So what are those first potential signs that people go, this could be?
Well, the big difficulty, and anybody, who's listening today, I'm guessing a lot of your listeners might love a process, right? Love a process. Menopause is not a process. You cannot process it. You can't even rationalize it. And the real difficulty, the really important point about menopause is the majority of women will begin to encounter symptoms of menopause months and even years before they've noticed a change in their periods. Now, what also makes this really difficult in the 21st century is many women now subscribe to contraception, depot injections, mini pills, Mirena coils, which means they aren't even having regular periods. So how on earth are you supposed to know that what's happening here could be related to this menopause thing here? And it almost becomes, in some instances, an impossible task. So lots of women, what we're doing is we're pretty rubbish at self-care. We're looking after the kids, we're looking after the husbands and partners, we're looking after, the home, we're trying to run full-time jobs, we're trying to do everything. And a lot of women are putting themselves nowhere or very, very low down on the list. And a lot of women will think, it's just, I'm getting a bit older, it's the pressure of life. This is why I'm maybe not feeling so great. And they're not associating what's happening to their minds and bodies with this life event called menopause because nobody's told us. So they're not connecting how they might be thinking and feeling with this thing called menopause because there's no connection being drawn from that. And the saddest thing that women begin to believe, Mark, about menopause is this. The majority of women believe they've got early onset dementia because one of the number one symptoms of menopause is brain fog. So you might have heard of the term brain fog. So what that means is the inability to remember simple words and phrases that you know. Now, I feel really bad because I used to laugh at me nana and me grandma, who used to call us the cat's name, the dog's name, my brother's name, and loads of names in between. And then in recent years, I was always, also starting to do the same. So can you imagine how terrifying that might be? Because what's happening is, I described it as women waking up one day feeling a bit meh. I'm feeling really anxious. I can't remember for this thing. It's a thingy, it's a thingy. I've put my keys in the kettle. I've gone over here. I haven't got a clue why I've gone over here anymore. And so really what they're doing is they're rocking into work, hoping that nobody really notices them.
Yeah.
Now, you might say to me, well, Sharon, you're not a bad presenter, and could you come and share this information, with my part of the business? And I'm saying, no, send somebody else, because I'm utterly terrified that I'm going to forget my own name in a sentence today. So rather than women almost powering towards opportunities, and it's a real reason why I think we see less women in senior roles, as they go through their careers, they're reversing away from them, going, oh, I'm terrified I'm going to make a big, massive mistake. Yeah. But the worst thing that's happening is women are waking up one day to get together, putting two and two together and coming up with 46. Okay. So these might be women that they could be colleagues, they could be friends, they could be family members of yours. And they're starting to say things like, I've lost my confidence. And that might be despite the fact they've been in their organisations for years doing similar roles. And what I say is usually within less than 6 months, they've told themselves they're no longer capable and they're leaving. So all that knowledge, all that, information, all that expertise is literally drifting away out of utter ignorance, because they're not associating what's happening to their minds and bodies with this life event called menopause, because nobody's told us. Yeah. Nobody's told us. Yeah. So it's really difficult to try and figure out what on earth is happening. So I guess one of the biggest gifts I give to my audiences when I'm working together is, if something isn't right for you and your body, and you've noticed changes, whether mentally, physically, or both, often, and it's negatively impacting the quality of your life, don't do nothing. Don't do nothing. Because left to their own devices, if you ask most women, what are you doing about that? Guess what the majority of women say? Any guesses?
Yeah, nothing. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Apologies for interrupting this podcast for a very quick 30-second pitch of my business. Theo James are a specialist manufacturing and engineering recruitment search firm based in Seaham in the Northeast. If you're looking for any staff or a new opportunity yourself, from a semi-skilled level right the way up to C-suite executive, then please get in touch. We have a specialist consultant in each discipline ready to help. I'm extremely proud of what we've built over the years, and I'd love to extend that service out to you. Thank you. Enjoy the podcast.
Absolutely nothing. Yeah. We're just getting on with it. So
Yeah.
So yeah.
And actually, is the synergy between what you mentioned right at the start in terms of that neurodiversity piece, actually, which is another thing that, often people themselves do not know why there potentially might be something going on there, which means it's very difficult to pick up in a workplace. And it's the same thing, I guess, isn't it? That it's a real challenge, that.
Well, the interesting thing is you're seeing a lot more information coming out about maybe women in their 30s onwards who are starting to think that they are being diagnosed with things like ADHD. Yeah. And I'm not an expert on that by any means, but my understanding is, especially when you link it to menopause, is many people have masked all of their life. They've been able to, mask it, pretend, whatever you want, whatever terminology you want to use. But when it comes to menopause, your hormones, because that's really what menopause is, it's the ultimate decline in your hormones, so much so that it ends an individual's fertility. So once you've lost those hormones, the ability to mask is almost stripped away, because they were part of your protection. Yeah. And so that's why I believe we're seeing a lot more women now, 30s, 40s onwards, who are recognizing there's really weird and wonderful things happening that I thought I could deal with, that I no longer can deal with. So yeah, it's like a perfect storm. It's like, several worlds are colliding all together. And that's because our hormones are super, super powerful and make us the women that we are. And once they have declined and ended, that means that individual is no longer, able to reproduce. And that's ultimately what menopause is. And most women, by the time they're 55, their fertility will have ended, their periods will have stopped, and they are no longer fertile. And that's really what menopause is all about. So, me personally, I wish to come back as an indoor cat rather than a menopausal woman. Do you know what I mean? Who would want to do that? And the thing is, we don't have a choice. Nobody's woke up one day going, oh, I can't wait for that menopause thing. Yeah. I mean, it does bring other benefits where you think, and especially if you've had nasty, heavy periods all of your life, and you think, well, that part of my life's over and that's good. But some women can mourn the end of fertility. You know, it's a sad time for some women, but ultimately you can't stop it. So I often say, even if you won a few spare million on the lottery and you thought, oh, I'd like to opt out of that menopause thing, you know, tough, it will be coming to a body near you at some point, whether you like it or not.
I imagine there's some psychologically for a lot of women it's difficult to deal with, because you know even women who've had the children they want to have, and that I still think that that change going through that must be quite difficult to accept for a lot of women.
I think we're pretty resilient as a race. And I think most people, you know, most women are able to kind of reconcile that. I think the thing is, more than anything, because all my work's done in the workplace, and I think it's really important, especially for your listeners who perhaps may be particularly in very male-dominated spaces. I want us to start to be thinking about being more sophisticated in our view of this world of menopause, because if you work with a load of blokes, you probably think, well, that's got nothing to do with me. We don't work with any women around here. And that's an absolute fine way to look at the world, but it's not a realistic way to look at the world. Because what I want to say to everybody today is every single person on the planet, whether that's directly or indirectly, is going to encounter menopause. So I want you to start thinking about menopause as being seen and unseen. So the most profound feedback I've had over the years, Mark, has really often been from men. Now, left to their own devices, they kind of say the subject of menopause and, well, that's got nothing to do with me. That's for those, you know, women. That's got nothing to do with me. But when men have come along, they've been really, really surprised. And the feedback I've had most often is, Sharon, this has probably been one of the best information sessions I've ever been to, because I wasn't expecting to learn so much and also have fun, because I'm all about if we can learn and have fun at the same time. And you might be thinking you could never do that around menopause. Come to one of my sessions and I'll show you how we can do that. But when I've had men telling me, Sharon, this information is probably going to help to save my relationship, that to me is when you know you're working with and for an employer of choice. And then only just before Christmas, I had a real sad piece of feedback, I suppose. It was one of the guys who was in this session, and he said, came up to me at the end and he said, I kind of had like light bulbs going off in my head when he was speaking. And he said, but I feel really quite sad about it, Sharon, because I feel like I've met you 3 years too late. He says, because I truly believe now, having heard what you had to say, it's the reason my 27-year-old marriage has fallen apart. Because I didn't know this, and neither did my wife. And again, I've had some really surprising feedback where some male colleagues have come back to me and said, Sharon, I went home, spoke to my wife, partner, or girlfriend, and because of your session, I now appear to know more than they do.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is the sort of state of the nation that we're in right now. And then I really want you to also think about, therefore, how menopause is impacting your business in an indirect way. So we know we've got an aging workforce and we know we've got an aging population. So what about those male colleagues who identify as male heterosexual, who are going home to wives, partners, and girlfriends who are menopausal? Those wives, partners, and girlfriends are sleep deprived. You know, exhaustion, not sleeping, is a real common symptom of menopause. So therefore, what impact might that have on your male colleagues who are rocking into work, maybe operating equipment, machinery, they're drivers, maybe they're doing, you know, really difficult project work and having to really deeply think about some really important things that they're doing. What impact is that having on their health and safety or their productivity? What about those male colleagues who are telling you in the workplace, I'm feeling really anxious, I'm feeling really stressed, maybe I'm feeling depressed. And the root cause, the relationships are falling apart at home because of menopause. So I want everybody to appreciate that menopause has tentacles that reach into the corners of every single person's life. And therefore, I believe that this information that I deliver can't harm anybody in any business, but it really could truly help anybody in any business.
Yeah, I love that.
And that's really why I'm so passionate about the subject, because I don't believe there isn't anybody who couldn't benefit. So I'm sure a lot of your listeners will have done and will continue to do great work about mental health and well-being, quite rightly so, I might add. But I hope many people think like me, that the smallest percentage of any workforce might suffer from mental ill health. So let's just metaphorically put mental ill health in the ring with menopause. It's going to be a full-scale knockdown every single time by menopause, because menopause is 100%. So there's no competition when you think about it like that. So that's really what I want everyone to start to appreciate and understand. This isn't just for women of a certain age. This isn't just a nice to have thing. This is actually impacting your bottom line, whether you believe it or not. It's happening, whether you can see it or you can't see it. It's impacting your workforce every day of the week.
Yeah, and I think I love that. Amazing. I think what good businesses do, they build communities. They build communities
Yeah.
and they build trust. And because you're at work most of the time, and if you're creating
Yes.
a safe space, because I
Mhm.
imagine a lot of it is if you trust your colleagues, you become friends to have those conversations. And have you seen so the work you do when you go into businesses?
Yeah.
I imagine initially there's a resistance because there's, like you say, there's that ignorance behind it. But quite quickly, do you see that eureka moment where people see that the synergy between bringing awareness to this and actually helping the workplace? And then let's be honest, a lot of owners of businesses will go, well, how's it help with P&L? Not all, but some.
Yeah, absolutely. And I come from that big business background. It's all about the bottom line. Let's not be, shying away from that. But I always say, the most difficult thing, especially when you're in a male-dominated space, is to get the buy-in. And I'm going to be really brutal and say the world seems to be, from my lens, still often be run by white middle-aged men. That's just how I see the world. So what I always say to the people I'm working with, you really need, the hard job you've got is to get some senior influencers into that first. I call it a pilot session, a test session. Now, the senior influencers, they could be male, female, other, they may or may not even be leaders in your business. I'm going to call them John today. Everyone's probably got a John somewhere in their business, and John might have been there for 20 years. And maybe he's one of the lads. And if John gets it, John then goes back to his part of the business and he tells everyone, you know what? That was worth doing. That was worth a couple of hours of my time to do that. So I'll tell you a funny story. So I was doing some work in a big engineering firm. And all I can say is I had a big group of guys shuffle in. And one of them, every time I looked in his direction, kind of put his head down like that. And I
Don't
thought,
ask me a
hey, never.
question.
He's never going to go and talk about this after the session, because I always send people on a secret mission these days. And that's really to go and share, just go and talk to another human after this session. See if you can do that. And I thought that guy's never going to do that just by his whole demeanor in the session I was running. So according to his HR director, he went home that night, spoke to his wife for over 2 hours, then apparently rang his mum up to tell her what he'd learned about it. And now he's a total advocate and he's strutting around a factory with 1,000 blokes telling them all that they really should learn about menopause in the workplace. And then again, another really interesting story. So they're all the same response, as in guys are coming in going, oh my goodness, why do I have to be here? So again, another guy, again, I was working on site. I work online as well, but this is another on-site session. And this guy, about 5 minutes to go, Mark, he came up to me and he went, do I really have to be here? And I kind of looked at this guy and I went, well, I've never met you before. And honestly, I didn't send you here. So somebody here wants you to be in this session. And then like a couple of minutes, he went, but do I really have to be here? And I went, look, do us a massive favor. I went, please sit through the session. I said, and then please, can you and I sit down? You can look us in the whites of the eyes and you can tell us exactly what you thought of the session, because I'm open and ready for your feedback. So please do that for me. Will you do it? And he went, yeah, okay. Like, oh, okay. So anyway, all I can say to you is this guy almost skipped across the room. He went, I've had so much fun. I've learned so much. He went, well, it's one of the best things I've ever done. And of his own accord, he's written me this testimonial, I suppose. So he really did a 180 from being oh my goodness. And the interesting thing is, he said, Sharon, for nearly a whole week, I tried. He's like, tried everything not to come to your session. With every fiber in my body, I did not want to be there. And the guy, again, he did a total 180 and he said, I can't stop telling people about it. And so that's what it's all about. If we can all just normalize the conversation and enable women to work through menopause. And the really terrible thing now in the 21st century is every single one of us is going to have to work later in life than we've ever had to do in history. So I talk about me, I'm nearly 56, and I was led to believe, I was sold the dream that I would be able to retire at 60 growing up. But in 2010, the pensionable age was extended. So for somebody of my age of nearly 56, my pensionable age has gone to 67. So I would say if you're a younger person, guess what direction of travel your pensionable age is heading? Well, it's only going one way. So if you think about it like this, for the very first time in history, there's going to be millions and millions more women having to work full-time longer than ever before. And that trend is just set to continue as pensionable ages continue to be increased. So this is why it's a business issue. So we keep being told, don't we, that there's more vacancies than good quality humans to fill them. I know that, I mean, my other half works in the engineering world as well, so I know how difficult it is to recruit, attract and retain people these days. So we're going to have to be more diverse, and you're probably going to have to think about having more women in the future, you know, attracting them into STEM workplaces. And that's really important. So that means you're going to have to think about and embrace things that happen to female bodies that we didn't ask for, and menopause is really one of them. So we didn't want menopause to happen, but it's a life event that's going to happen to us all, whether we like it or not. So if you want to be more diverse and you want to attract and retain the best people, then things like menopause are really just going to have to become part of everyday life. Because if you've got a workforce now, and it's estimated that women aged 50 plus are the fastest growing demographic in the workplace in the UK, and apparently interestingly across the G7, then you're going to lose good people if you don't think about these type of things. And that affects your bottom line ultimately, doesn't it?
Of course it does, 100%. And what's the first step that business can do to start to change this and start to change the mindset? Obviously, get you in for conversations, the first step.
Yeah, well, it really does start, and I guess that's why I set up my service, because it really starts with education. It has to, because if you don't know what you don't know, how can you? I call it seeing the world through a menopause lens, Mark. So I always say working with me is the start of something. But the very great thing about menopause is I'm a bit professionally grumpy, because I think there's a lot of people out there selling fear and complexity when there need not be fear and complexity. That's the first thing to say. And the brilliant news is, if you're an owner, a manager, a leader in your business, the brilliant thing is when we're talking about menopause is we're not reinventing the wheel and we're not starting from scratch. That's the first thing to say. So the example I will give you is, I'm sure most of your listeners has some kind of decent process for things like the disclosure of pregnancy. So if somebody disclosed a pregnancy, what might you do? Well, you might enable me to have a car parking space near the office if you thought that was appropriate. You may enable me to have a workstation review, an assessment, and I might end up with some equipment like a footrest or a desk fan. You might enable me to have time off for appointments. So what I'm saying to managers and leaders of the world is, it shouldn't evoke what I call a management eye roll, where your managers are going, oh, like another thing adding to me long list of things I'm now going to think about. What I'm saying is, what you're going to do is you're going to look in your small reasonable adjustment toolkit that I know you've got, and all you're going to do is you're going to flip and apply what you've been using. So that's how I want people to start recognizing what's the same, not what's different. So if you can start to see the world through what I call a menopause lens, what might you see differently? So it's simple things. And now I'm not a fan of writing a separate policy either. Again, I'm a bit controversial in this space, because I think if you start writing a separate policy for menopause, are you now disengaging a big part of your workforce? So if you write a policy for menopause, what about John in accounts who's got diabetes? Have you written a diabetes policy for John? So if you haven't, John now's feeling a bit miffed, because you think, well, maybe they don't care about me, they just care about menopausal women. So what I'm saying is, I believe best practice is, I've made up a word, is to menopausalize your current processes and to stitch it into the ones that are currently in flight and that are familiar to your people right now. So an example would be, in a return to work process, which most companies have, you would reference menopause because it could be the reason and the root cause for that sickness or lateness. And again, this doesn't just apply to your female colleagues, it could be your male colleagues as well. What about uniform reviews? So most people in manufacturing and construction, uniforms are part of the deal. So your next uniform review might not be coming around for the next 24 months, for example, but when it does, has the uniform been designed solely around male bodies and no one's really thought about the female form? What about the fabric choices that you've made? Could you have better fabric choices because of things like hot flushes to do with menopause? So again, it's always about no cost, low cost, and simplicity, I can't stress this enough, is always the key. So again, I'll talk about the manufacturer who I've been working with. It was really interesting. So they had fleeces for when it was cold, all branded fleeces, all gorgeous things, but they were over the head fleeces.
Yeah.
women were like, I get really hot and it's really, restrictive. They said, what, can we have some places with a zip? Transformed everything. A zip that you can just undo.
Yeah.
Simple things.
Yeah.
Tiny, small things that can make a massive difference. So this is what I want your listeners to think about, not think, oh my God, it's another enormous, nasty thing coming over the hill. I've got to do all these huge things. I've got to make huge investments. The biggest investment you've got to make really is educate yourself and your people. And then once you've understood the subject, you can start to see the world through a menopause lens. And then after that, it's all about simple, small, no cost, low cost, reasonable adjustments that invariably you've mostly already got, which is brilliant, isn't it?
Absolutely. And look, this has been amazing, but I want to end it. I want to press you on. You mentioned in your sessions that you have a secret mission.
Mm-hmm.
The data that I get from these podcasts is about 82% male. So let's say there's 1,000 people listen, 1,001 plus me. What have we got to do? What is our secret mission?
Well, you've got again, if you're in business, I'm sure you want to be profitable. So that's the first thing. So I want your listeners to really start to appreciate that this isn't a women's only issue. This is an everybody thing that is it's impacting your business right now, even if you don't believe that it is. It absolutely is. So I would implore you to get educated on the subject. Now, there's loads of what's brilliant now. I mean, I'm saying I'm kind of old. So in the olden days, if I wanted to get information, I used to have to get on a bus, go to a library and pull books off a shelf. What's brilliant now is most of us have one of these. I call it a supercomputer, which means you can type into a search engine of your choice and you can get loads of ways of getting information. So you might not be a reader, but you can listen, podcasts, what we're doing today. You can watch things. I mean, I've been on TV. You can read a book. There's loads of ways you can absorb information. But what I would say is take an interest and start to appreciate how and why this might be important for you in your business right now and moving forward in the 21st century. And think about how you might want to get more engaged and more clued up on the subject. And I guess that's why I set up Miss Menopause. And the work that I do is completely inclusive. It really is suitable for anybody and everybody. I don't run separate sessions for managers versus non-managers. I say, if we're going to build a culture of trust and engagement, anybody and everybody can come into the sessions that I run. And I think that's really, really important. And that's just because, I know it sounds ridiculous, but because we're starting from almost scratch, which is mad, isn't it, when women have been on the planet forever. But if we're all starting from almost a position of not really knowing very much, whoever we are, if we all start at the same time from the same point, that's got to build much more engagement and trust with each other because we're all learning together at the same time. And I think that's really, really important when you talk about your business and your culture. And that's all it's about. It's about enabling people to have conversations. And I was saying, never underestimate the power of just having a conversation. And finally, I would say it isn't just about being a one-way traffic, as in you, the business, think that you have to do everything for your people and help them to death. It's also about holding your people to account and saying, hey, Sharon, I've heard your story and you've told me that you might need A, B, and C, which, small reasonable adjustments. It might be access to drinking water, might be a window that opens. Remember, these are simple, low cost things. But if you're a manager and a leader, you also have the opportunity to say to me, but hey, Sharon, what do you intend to do about this at the same time? So I was saying, unless it becomes an equal active partnership where both individuals join in that relationship equally, it's never going to work. So this is a partnership between you and your people around how you can, make working in your environment more attractive to get people to come and join and to stay. And menopause is a life event. Remember that unlike things like mental ill health, it will actually impact every single human in your business over time.
I completely agree. And there's all this awareness about mental health now. People almost know what to look out for, but they don't. But so that for me gets this back to the education piece. And look, it's been great. And I think for me, probably the biggest overriding has been having a conversation. Not being scared to have a conversation. And why should it be taboo? And that doesn't have to be your colleagues or your staff. It can be your wife, your sister, your mother, whoever it be.
Yeah.
Because actually,
100%.
like you say, the people listen now might actually now know more than their wife than it does.
Yes.
But I think just having that power that trickle effect to make this a subject which is going to help someone, because like you say, you can change someone to an extent where you can actually end up having a divorce. So you mentioned, I mean, that's life changing, and prevention is much better than the cure. So look, thank you for this. It's been superb, and obviously I'll obviously put your details there, because I know some of my clients who have had you in who have spoken extremely highly of you as well. And I just think it has to start with education and have that conversation and making this not a taboo subject, and because why should it be? So look, thank you so much, Sharon. It's been tremendous. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sharon. It was great. Really, really good.